Outbound 17. It's heavy Pratt to Niles Center. Inbound Eisenhower, delays start before the Tri-State. 40 minutes, 390 to downtown. 26 from Wolf. Outbound 30 minutes to 390. Stevenson, 26 minutes from the Veterans Memorial Tollway to Lakeshore Drive. Outbound 24. Ryan, 17 minutes, 95th to downtown. I-57, 11 minutes, I-80 to the merge. Outbound 13. It's a little heavy approaching I-80. And that's traffic. I'm Jim Telemonte on AM 560, The Answer.
Chicago's Morning Answer continues next. Your official Chicagoland weather forecast. In our AM 560 Weather Center, Steve Williams.
Windy and cloudy today, couple of showers, high 64. Showers late tonight, breezy, low 55. Rainy, maybe a thunderstorm for tomorrow morning, a breezy day, high 60. AccuWeather's Minutecast has expanded to 4 hours. Download the new app today. I'm Steve Williams on AM 560, The Answer.
57 at O'Hare, next news 8:30. Chicago's Morning Answer continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
From the Matrix Home Solutions studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560, The Answer.
Listen to AM 560, The Answer, online at 560theanswer.com, on the AM 560 mobile app, on your Alexa-powered smart speaker, on TuneIn, iHeart, and radio.com. This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Warren Wilhelm's wife is a real piece of work. They're a fun couple. New York City's First Lady, Shirlene McCray, tweeting out, as attacks on Asian American communities continue, we're asking New Yorkers to show up for their neighbors and intervene when witnessing hateful violence or harassment. I know that can be frightening when you aren't sure what to do or say, but you can learn.
I can learn how to become a vigilante.
Bernie Goetz's day has finally arrived. Yeah. Hey, New York. Vigilante justice has just been endorsed by the First Lady, the mayor's wife.
Yeah, she wants him to personally, physically intervene to stop violent crimes. But that happened 9 months after she convinced her husband to get on board with the defund police. So when you try to defund police, who's there to protect the people?
Well, you don't need police.
Right, because we're just all superheroes, right?
Well,
you got the
vigilantes at least. It's just remarkable.
We're the guardian angels when you need them.
Chicago last year, just 2020, 792 total murders, 719 by way of a perpetrator with a gun, up 53%. Almost 3,500 people shot and wounded last year. That was up 51%.
Oh, my God.
So far this year, we're a little bit off the pace of last year, thankfully, and probably in part because of how brutal February was.
Yeah, the snowstorms.
Nonetheless, a person is shot every 3 hours in Chicago. A person is murdered every 17 hours. We've got 110 murders so far this year. And, of course, we've talked quite a bit about other violent crimes that are way up, like carjackings.
Up 283%.
103 homicides this year, just to be specific.
And 83 high school students, or kids in Chicago have been killed this year, or last year, 83.
8 last year.
Yes.
For more on all this about policing, we're pleased to be joined by Jason Johnson, who's a former deputy commissioner of the Baltimore Police Department, currently president of the Law Enforcement Legal Defense Fund. Jason, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Good morning. Good to be with you.
Morning. So I'm a bit confused because support for Black Lives Matter is going down to a minority of Americans, according to recent survey by Gallup. More than 2/3 of Americans, so supermajority, oppose defunding police. So if they oppose the idea and they oppose the organization that is the primary promoter of the idea and then influencing politicians and so forth, how is it they're making so much progress?
It's a great question. Although I think most reasonable people understand defunding the police is not good, they are led to believe through certain mythology that the police are sort of the problem and that the police need all sorts of regulations that would actually sort of disempower them. We already see it happening. Chicago, Baltimore, L.A., Dallas. I mean, cities across America, the police are being disempowered, officially and unofficially. Prosecutors are being elected that don't want to prosecute. And we see these crime rates that you mentioned a few moments ago in all of those cities and more going through the roof.
Well, I mean, would you be a police officer today if you had to choose again?
No, I wouldn't. And it's sad because it is a great job, and it was a great job for me for a couple decades, and it was very rewarding. Something I was drawn to. So many other people, young people, are drawn to or have been drawn to historically, but every police department in the country now is really struggling with that. It shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. They can't get people that want to be cops anymore. And unfortunately, the people who do want to be cops, who are putting their hands up and saying, I want to do this, many of them, it's just, it's because they want a job. It's not a calling as it has been in the past because of, they've vilified the entire profession.
What was the inflection point for you in Baltimore? Let me suggest that one may have been, and because this is an important moment, in the rioting in Baltimore after the Freddie Gray death in police custody, when the then mayor, SRB, Stephanie Rawlings Blake, said that police are to create a safe space for the rioters.
I think that sent a really troubling message to the rank and file. These are men and women that were on the front lines, that were risking their lives. They were working incredibly long shifts, just trying to save the city. And then they were told by their leaders to stand down, take a knee, allow people to destroy things. And the mayor is not the only one. Moments of days later, the state's attorney charged a handful of cops in the death of Freddie Gray, couldn't get a conviction. And
all the cases were dismissed.
Yeah, absolutely. All those officers were ultimately vindicated, both criminally and administratively. They were not found to have engaged in any misconduct, criminal or administrative misconduct, and they all remain on the job today. But it's a different department now than it was then, and the crime stats show that.
So let's talk about Baltimore as a microcosm. We obviously spend a lot of our time talking about Chicago, but I think it's interesting for people to hear different perspectives, some similarities, some differences. So some of the similarities, the civilian political leadership you're talking about, from the mayor's office to the prosecutor, and what happened in Baltimore after the Freddie Gray death was sort of a forerunner to then what happened across America last summer and into the fall. So can you walk us through what happened in Baltimore and sort of the lessons to be taken away from that?
Well, I think it's very it's a striking parallel to Chicago. Both cities that had a high-profile police-involved incident, the Laquan McDonald case in Chicago and the Freddie Gray case in Baltimore, right around the same time, that led to riots, that led to calls for reform, that led to prosecutions, and ultimately have led to ill-advised legislation that overregulates the police, that doesn't allow them to do their job, that dissuades people from entering the profession, and for those who are in the profession, they take a more of a fireman type approach to crime fighting now. It's not proactive. It's respond to complaints, address the immediate complaint, and then withdraw in an effort to survive, essentially. Both cities also have activist social justice warrior prosecutors in Marilyn Mosby and Kim Fox. And that they've had deleterious effects on the crime in both cities. Shootings, homicides have gone through the roof in both cities, and it's unabated. And there's no call to change that in either city that I'm aware of. There are only a minority of voices that are calling out the problems and saying we need to address this and we need to do it right now.
Yeah, I mean, Kim Fox got reelected, even after the whole Jussie Smollett, debacle too. But what, besides getting them out of office, what else can we do?
Fight back. There has to be more attention drawn to the issues of these social justice prosecutors. My organization, the Law Enforcement Legal Defense Fund, we actually produced a paper on this. It's on our website, policedefense.org, where we looked very carefully at the data in Chicago and in Baltimore and in other cities that have social justice prosecutors. We need to bring greater attention to that because I don't think the electorate is quite aware of the very clear connection between these spikes in crime, these massive increases, and the lack of productivity by the prosecutors' offices because they simply don't want to prosecute. They don't want to put people in jail, even when they're known violent criminals.
Right, and I think people don't have an appreciation for how many of those sorts of prosecutors are now in office in big cities, Krasner in Philadelphia and Vance in New York, and and Bowdoin in San Francisco. We mentioned Fox. We mentioned Mosby. I mean, you're talking about tens of millions of people whose public safety is in part in the hands of people who don't want to prosecute predators.
The problem is getting greater and wider spread, and you mentioned a few of the big names, but cities large and small across America, and even some counties are starting to elect these social justice prosecutors, and they're taking the position that the prosecutor has the ability to nullify, substantive crimes relating to drugs or prostitution or trespassing, theft. All of these things, the prosecutors are just wiping them out and saying we no longer enforce these things. We no longer seek jail terms, even for some people who are prior convicted felons when they engage in an act of violence. And it's a philosophical approach that has caught fire, and it's having really, really bad results. I mean, look, it's hard to find a city in America that doesn't have homicides and or shootings up 20-30% in the last year. And that is one of the two main factors that are driving. The other main factor, of course, is police disempowerment.
And so as we look ahead to this spring and summer, against the backdrop first of the Derek Chauvin trial in Minneapolis, but regardless of outcome there, with what you were suggesting is happening in places across the country, including in Chicago, where we mirrored what was presented by socialists at the federal level, that was presented and signed into law here at the state level, all of those changes to make police more exposed to their to civil liability per their actions on the job, to have more and permanent record keeping about any complaints that can be made anonymously, and so on and so forth. All sorts of things that, as you were just suggesting, incentivize police to stay in their cars. Well, what do you anticipate for this summer, regardless of the outcome of the Chauvin trial?
Well, there's a confluence of things that are going to be a problem. One is the weather, of course. In most cities, especially that experience cold weather in the winter, in the summertime, there tends to be noticeable increase in crime. People are outside. People are more likely to be a victim or more likely to commit an act of violence. You have the Chauvin trial, which we probably won't be able to get into it too in depth, but there's reason to be concerned that the outcome could cause civil unrest because of some reckless approach in the way the case was charged and will be tried, and also coming out of the pandemic. So a lot of restrictions are being lifted, and so fortunately a lot of people are able to sort of get back to work, and in doing so, unfortunately, make themselves possibly a victim of violent crime, whereas victims have been hard to come by. Most of these cities' robberies have gone down. It's kind of interesting. Even though shootings and homicides have gone up, many cities' robberies have gone down, and I think the obvious reason there is there's fewer people that can be victims, and so we'll see a return of that, and the disempowerment of police on top of that with federal and state legislation. And so it's a recipe for great concern, I would say.
Well, then let's circle back to New York City and the First Lady of New York City. She suggested, are you ready, that witnesses step into the middle of a hate crime or incident, engage directly with the person who is being targeted by asking a question like, what time is it? How do you think that police...
Is that how you were trained?
Is that, yeah.
So
to try to distract them. Hey, what time is it?
Yeah, essentially we want to replace police, and instead of focusing on making improvements to police, which of course we can always make improvements to police, but instead of focusing on that, we want to basically empower citizens to engage people who are potentially violent people who could lash out, could assault them, could kill them. It's just absurd. It's naive, and we really need to kind of get back on track here with remembering who we've placed the trust in to protect citizens, and that's the police, and we need to get back to that.
Well, here's the problem, Jason. I understand from socialist Spice Girl Ayanna Pressley, who was poorly educated in Chicago before she made her way to the Northeast.
Frances Parker.
She notes, and she is a noted criminologist, I understand, police brutality is the sixth leading cause of death for young black men. So until police stop targeting and executing young black men, we can't provide any more power or authority to the police.
This is, I use the term mythology. This is the mythology I was speaking of, where there's so much rhetoric out there that people, if they don't have the time or the interest to really dig through it and see if there's any validity to it, they wouldn't know otherwise. So to hear that reckless statement being made, which by the way is completely false, They hear much being made about over and over and over, police are killing unarmed black men, when in fact those numbers are going down significantly. First off, the numbers are relatively small. I think the police last year in 2020, they killed something like 20 quote-unquote unarmed black men, but unarmed doesn't necessarily mean it wasn't wasn't necessary to do, but that's the number that everyone focuses on. So it's like 20 out of a billion contacts, or something that law enforcement has with people. And the numbers are so small, especially when you compare it to the number of black men who are victims of homicide, not involving the police. And that problem goes completely ignored, and we focus entirely on this very, very small number issue that we could talk about as adults about ways to even focus more on that. But instead, we just disempower the police, handcuff the police, and expect it to get better.
Jason Johnson, former Deputy Commissioner of the Baltimore Police Department, currently president of the Law Enforcement Legal Defense Fund. PoliceDefense.org is the website for their content. Jason, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Connect with Dan and Amy using the AM560 mobile app. Download it today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.
Cold floors? The problem may be down below in the basement or crawl space. Hi, I'm Roy Spencer with Permaseal. I'm happy to say that we can now help make your basement and crawl space warmer and therefore your upstairs more comfortable with our new product, PermaFoam. We spray this insulating foam between your floor joists, which will not only increase